Hi, I'm Timmu Töke, and you're listening to the Tomorrow with Rovio podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tomorrow with Rovio podcast. I'm your host, Ben Mattis, and with me today is Timmu Töke, the CEO and co-founder of Wolf3D. Wolf3D is a company focused on the personal 3D avatar creator for video games, virtual worlds, VR spaces, effectively the metaverse. The topic of avatars is definitely one that comes up a lot on this podcast. In any of the episodes where we've talked about AI or the metaverse, it's obviously come up. And I thought it made a lot of sense to find an expert in the space and deep dive with them. In this conversation, Timmu and I go from the super highest level, abstractionalists versus immersionists, and the sort of different theoretical value propositions of avatars in video games, all the way down to the technical and nitty-gritty, how Wolf3D uses AI to automate the process of avatar generation, how animation and voice technology are changing the landscape, how AI is helping change the landscape of digital twins and representation in video games in general. If you're interested in the metaverse, you're probably interested in avatars, and you'll probably find this conversation very insightful. I hope you enjoy. Okay, let's dive in. I always start super simple. Introduce yourself, your company, and maybe tell us a little bit about the problems you guys are trying to solve. The broad theme of this podcast is the sort of future of entertainment. There's a particular slice of that you are highly invested in. So maybe describe that slice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. It's going to be really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Timmu. I'm the CEO of Wolf3D, and we create personal avatars of people for games and virtual worlds. We're also building a cross-platform avatar, cross-game avatar platform, which is kind of an avatar standard people can use in many different games.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe just for background, like what we see is that games are becoming more social. They're becoming kind of a gathering place for people where they hang out. And that creates a bigger need for better representation of our identities in games. And that's kind of our core thesis. And the other thing is, there's increasing amounts of virtual worlds that people can visit. And in every world currently have a different avatar, which kind of doesn't make sense in the long run. So we're trying to kind of simplify the experience and create a cross-platform identity service that helps people kind of navigate between experiences with the same avatar.
Okay, great. So, avatars inside of games, not necessarily new. We've been making avatars in games and customizing them for a while. Avatars in games that look like us or can easily be made to look like us, certainly new-ish, and there's lots of stuff we can talk about there. And then this sort of proto-metaverse-y kind of platform of persistency of profile, persistency of character that you can carry over between games. That's obviously another very hot and new space. So we'll definitely talk some about that area as we go forward. But let's start with the basic, like the creating and customizing character. Again, I don't remember the first time we did that. The word avatar as it relates to games dates back to Ultima, I guess, or, Ultima 2 or something like that. Richard Garriott was obviously big on that way back when. There wasn't a ton of visual tweaking that we did back then, but obviously as the technology has advanced, we've been customizing our characters for years. So why do you think that is? Why are players interested and willing to spend time tweaking these little details on their character's appearance? And in particular, what I'm interested in is why it's different. What motivates players to do that in a single player game versus a multiplayer game? Because I think there's probably different driving, motivating factors there.
Sure. Absolutely. I think, avatars as a kind of representation of our identity in a game, started from the first games. Like in arcade games, you could have like a 3-character combination that represented yourself in a high score list. And I think even back then, people really were very thoughtful about like how they represented themselves.
Good point.
Yeah. So, and obviously now it's more, high fidelity. It's more high, like it's becoming more realistic. But I think the driver is the same. It's how you represent yourself in this world that you're experiencing. It's kind of your avatar is your agent in this world. It doesn't have to be like yourself in every experience, but it doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of the core thing. It's your identity. It's an extension of yourself. And the other thing is like, it's just fun. It's just pure fun. It's a part of the game. Creating a character is a very creative process. And either you want to make it cool and scary, or you want to make it cute, depending on, your preferences and the game you're playing. But I think it's just very fun. People enjoy the process of creating a character.
Mm-hmm. Do you see differences once you start introducing, multiplayer to the equation, where I'm making a character not just for my own identity, but also my perception?
Yeah, absolutely. In a multiplayer game, your avatar it's kind of more practical in a way, It's kind of how people judge you. It's like you display your rank, you display your skill, your status in the game through your avatar. So, for example, like in Fortnite, there's a new form of cyberbullying, which is, the default. So if you play with the default skin, other kids like bully you and kill you and don't want to play with you because you're a default, which usually means you're a noob. So, signaling that you are an advanced player through having a more advanced character that had bought some premium features for is kind of a practical thing to do if you want to be, among the cool kids. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the main difference. Yeah. And obviously in multiplayer games, people spend a lot more money on character customizations than in a single player game.
Right. Yeah. No, I for sure the business model exists more so in multiplayer. In fact, in many multiplayer games, it is the business model. And so I can get this idea of wanting to, be perceived as a cool kid, right? You don't want to be perceived as default. You don't want to be perceived as noob.
Mm-hmm.
So you spend time and energy into customizing how you look. But I mean, are there levels deeper than that, do you think, when it comes to how I express myself in a public way in these games? I mean, let's look at Fortnite as an example. If I've been playing that game for any amount of time, I probably have a library of skins that I can choose from. And, I can kind of change my skins in the game the way I change my clothes in the real world, right? And sometimes maybe I want to wear the banana skin. Because what? Because I want to be perceived as silly or funny or jokey or happy. And then other times, maybe I want to wear the Flash skin or the, whatever, the Marvel skin, because I want to be perceived as hardcore or aggressive or cool or just a fanboy. So do you see people playing with different representation and perception with these skins in these games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people, choose the skin and the avatar look based on, first the use case, like what's the game, and also like the mood. Do you want to go there and focus on, winning the game, or you're going there to just mess around with your friends?
Okay.
So yeah, and I think definitely, yeah, depends. Like it's just like your normal wardrobe. There's clothings for different occasions and
skins for different occasions.
Exactly.
So first of all, let's take a second to differentiate about all the different types of avatars. So when I think of an avatar, there's the base character. And to that, physical attributes. Is it tall? Is he thin? Is he, larger? Is he thinner? Possibly sex. Is it male? Is it female? Hair color, eye color, that kind of stuff. There's then obviously sort of literally clothes, right? Am I wearing a hat? Am I wearing glasses? Am I wearing a shirt? So there's those kind of customization elements. Then there's also this just idea of skins, right? Where sometimes I am the banana guy, and sometimes I am, whatever, Wolverine. And there's not that suggestion that underneath those is me. It's not Ben Mattis wearing a Wolverine costume and then Ben Mattis wearing a banana costume. It's rather one game, I am the banana guy, and the other game, I am Wolverine. So, do you see a divide between the concept of skins versus customization?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, to really know the answer is to give, we have to give people a kind of a more persistent avatar base, which is connected with their real identity, and then see how that really affects their, behavior in the long run. What we see is that even if people have like their own avatars, they often come back to the customization menu and play around, change their face tattoos, try out the new skin. If there's something new, that comes up that our artists make, people try it out. So I don't know. I don't know if it's different. It's just like current games mostly only have skins, I guess, most of them, which kind of completely remakes the avatar versus, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to explore whether or not that's a business model decision, right? Because it's somehow easier to sell a skin because it's a single thing.
Yeah.
Or is it an aesthetic decision, right? It's easier to make your game look good when everyone is running around in a skin that has been carefully designed by the artists to be whole. Or is it a player choice thing where there's reason to suspect that players prefer a single skin over, that sort of idea of customizing their avatar. But I do agree that the current market trend, I mean, obviously, if you look at things like Fortnite, it kind of dominates, feels like skins somehow are the most dominant form of character customization. But
Yeah.
I wonder, I suspect that might evolve.
I think it will. Like we have also decided to have skins for now, although we have personal avatars. So we create the whole set and we have, maybe a couple of different versions of the same set with different colors and stuff like that. But there was the same thinking process. If we give the user a full complete control over the whole character, then some users will come up with some interesting stuff that is not aesthetically pleasing. But I think overall, like we will be more like the real world where you kind of wear anything you want when you exit the building, but people will judge you for what you wear.
Right.
And that will kind of, determine what you put on. So,
well, so let's ask a sort of existential question. I had Matthew Ball on this podcast a few weeks ago. Are you familiar with Matthew Ball?
I am. Yeah.
So I had Matthew Ball on the podcast a few weeks ago. I asked him a sort of similar question, that his attitude towards the role of the avatar in the metaverse, and did there need to be character persistency, or was it okay for people to have kind of, whatever, as many skins as they wanted? He definitely leans in the direction of choice, right? Sometimes you want to look like a banana, sometimes you want to look like, whatever, muffin, I guess. He definitely sees that as the sort of one of the key selling points of the possibility space of the metaverse. And I'll ask you a slight variant of that question.
Mm-hmm.
Is the metaverse more powerful with skins, where we have that aesthetic consistency, or with avatar personalization, where we have greater expressiveness and sort of a closer mapping to reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the traditional social media platforms, then, the strongest ones, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them are based on your real identities. So when you create an account that is connected with your real identity, it's more persistent. The network effects of that network are stronger. If you have a lot of users that create random accounts, that are just a version that you create for this particular application, then the network effects of that network are lower. Facebook was the first kind of platform that really enforced using real identities, and it felt safe for the first time because it was like kind of a closed or a limited network at first, but then it kind of became, a standard. And can you think of any networks, any social networks where you don't have your own identity? Maybe like Reddit, but there are not many of them around.
That's a good point. So then I'll put words in your mouth. You think real identity, i.e. avatar and personalization, is a bigger opportunity in the metaverse than just masses and masses of skins?
Yeah, and I think like skins and like real identity are not one or the other. Like you can
Okay.
have skins that are, you can have a Marvel, comic style skin that you put on your own personal avatar.
Sure.
It's
Absolutely.
just
Appearance
Mhm.
in general, customization, skin or avatar. Do you think it's more important to a specific demographic, or is it like do men spend more or spend more time on their characters than women? Do young people spend more time or more money than old? Is there a demographic breakdown?
Yeah, so I don't have like a complete overview, but
Okay.
what I've seen is that kids, younger people, tend to experiment more with their identity. And that's not only as game avatars, it's like in general in their life, right? Their identities are not formed yet. And
Oh,
also
it's
just,
interesting.
yeah, so they're used to having a lot of different identities in games, and also like they're experimenting with who they are and what they become and so forth. And the older people get, the more they already know what they want to be, and they also know what what they're not,
Hmm.
and so they kind of know the idealized version of themselves they want to be, I guess, more than young people.
I think that's really interesting. I don't know that I'd ever thought of it that way. I wonder if one's ability or willingness to role play also follows a similar curve whereby kids are more comfortable role playing than older people in general. Obviously there's lots of old people who, are comfortable playing AD&D because they grew up with it. But I was having a
Yeah,
conversation just the other day with my sister who, is not a role player. I was actually sort of telling her the benefits of kind of role play in terms of exactly this question, sort of answering some questions about, identity, not so much, fun, but more answering questions about identity. And she found the idea very difficult. The idea of kind of
mm,
trying to pretend to be someone she wasn't, even in a virtual space, she found that very difficult. And I wonder if that's somehow associated with, at least partially, with age. That's interesting.
I think it is, because I mean, kids do role play, or like they in offline. They do
Right.
it a lot offline as well, so like for them it's a natural thing to do.
Hmm.
And I think it just extends to games.
Okay, so we've explored a little bit the reasons why do we want avatars? Why do we need avatars? Kind of why do avatars exist? Why are they popular? Let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty, the perception of them.
Mhm.
So if we look at most popular mass market avatar creators right now, so I think of, Nintendo's Mii's, Apple's, whatever they called, Memojis, Snapchat's Bitmojis, etc. They generally go for, in some cases, hyper stylized. I mean, one step beyond a line drawing in certain cases. Is this technical? Is it deeper than this? If Unreal just recently announced this amazing technology, their metahuman sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so clearly we're more and more approaching the world of photorealism being a couple of mouse clicks away. If metahuman technology was kind of one click, if I could take a photo and immediately have an almost perfect digital representation of myself that I could then inject into a game, and everyone in the world could do that. Do you think
Yeah.
is there an audience for that? Is that what people want, or do they want the stylized obfuscation of themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the MetaHuman is awesome, and I know the team that built it, and they are like the top people in avatars. Epic bought them a couple of years ago, and there's 15 years of research that went into that, and it's not even trying to create a representation from a photo. It's just giving a kind of a large variety of realistic characters you can create that are amazingly rigged, that you can use in your game. But the question is, do people really want to be realistic, even if they could be in a game? So, like, our experience is, the first product we built was a scanning app. So we took 15 or 20 photos of the person, and that we generated a realistic scan, and then I tried to kind of convince them that realistic avatars are really cool. Well, people generally thought that it's creepy, and even if the representation is like authentic, people don't like authentic. So I think a kind of an example is how people create their social media profiles.
Yes.
You want your social media to be authentic. You want to show your character and how you're special and what you stand for, but you don't want to show a picture of you, an ugly picture of you in the dark, whatever. So you always you curate what you look like. Yes. And also people want to curate their avatars. They want to curate what they look like. But most people prefer a more cartoony representation of themselves. It can be more cartoony for an environment where that fits. It can be less, but they definitely don't want a fully realistic avatar that really is a one-on-one copy of themselves.
No, that's very interesting. And I guess I have some knock-on questions about that in terms of, AI and like if it's creepy. If I'm looking at a digital twin of myself and it's already creepy, and I'm sort of thinking like, well, what do I do with this thing? This thing's going to stand out as weird and awkward inside of a video game, because it looks so realistic and the game world is not hyper realistic. There's obviously additional layers of discomfort that could be added if we start saying, and it sounds like me, and it talks like me, and it's like not just an avatar representation of me, it's like an AI-powered digital twin of me somehow persisting inside this world when I'm disconnected. And that will open up all sorts of additional questions. So do you guys think at all about that, about like maybe the difference between the sort of avatar and the quote-unquote digital twin, and whether or not the latter, this idea of a kind of complete digital copy of myself inside of a persistent world, do you think there's a market for that? Is that something people want?
Yeah, if it would be possible to replicate a whole world and make a better version of that virtually, then I'm sure there will be a market for that, But for the perfect digital twin, I think, it would completely change the world for like companies, like for enterprise customers that want to do remote work. If you would have a perfect digital twin, you could put on a VR headset and like meet your colleagues actually. It's a dream that many have spoken about for a long time since VR came along, I guess. But this is like ultimately like this will be perfect when you have the perfect virtual avatar that looks like a real person.
And that is somehow easy to create, right? Like I don't want to spend hours or days or thousands of dollars getting a model of my face created so I can have this avatar inside this digital world. I want to click a button and have a 3D scanner somehow scan my head, and then, okay, boom, now I have my, my avatar foundation. Anything beyond that, I think, and your audience for this is obviously going to go way down, which I think leads to this next question, which is that of likeness. So again, if you take, the Mii as an example, the Nintendo's Mii, your likeness is, it's pretty distant. I mean, yeah, you can kind of, put glasses on and cut your hair to look like yours, but the face is a pretty blank canvas. Bitmojis and Meemojis are a little bit more, give you a little bit more control, a little bit more possibility to make it look like you. Wolf3D, your tech, even more so. So how important do you think likeness is? Are players, are they hungry to have an easy solution to make their avatars look like themselves? Or, do they want that anonymity? Do they want the power of anonymity? I guess, what do you guys think are the pros and cons of each? And obviously you have a bias towards likeness, and that's totally fair and fine. But I'm just wondering if you guys have sort of gone through what the pros and cons of the two extremes are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think it really depends on the game and the use case and the environment. So first, if you play a game that has a very strong storyline, then you don't want to have your own character in there. If you don't want to go see a movie in a cinema and you are the main character, it's not appealing to me, at least. I don't know. So like that will be that's a different market. When it comes to multiplayer games, then I think the more you play the games with the people you already know, the more you want to have an accurate representation. For example, in kind of all kinds of meeting apps, it doesn't matter if it's in VR or not VR. Most users ask, their first question is like, "Where's my avatar?"
Right.
I'm meeting my real colleagues. I'm meeting my real friends. So I want to be myself, and that's and those are, I guess, two ends of the spectrum, and then there's stuff in between, like Fortnite. Sometimes play with friends, sometimes don't play with friends. So it depends. But I think like a statistic I can share from our experience is, in our Ready.me avatar creator, we also allow users to make an avatar without the photo. So it's a kind of a generic avatar. And depending on the use case, about 60 to 90% of people make a personal avatar. So so most people still want a representation of themselves, at least in our partner apps.
Okay. So, well, I buy that, and I would say when I was preparing for this interview, I went and I tried to read some of the research, and it's interesting how far back the sort of academic research goes into avatars and personalization and representation. There's quite a body of research there, and I was sort of interested and maybe more than a little intimidated by how much there was to read there. But one thing I read that really stood out that was interesting to me was that there's some research to suggest that players are willing to invest more energy into their in-game tasks when they more strongly identify with their avatar. That having an avatar that looks like them increases this identification and therefore sort of increases their connection to the game and their willingness to invest in that game and try to achieve. So do you have thoughts on that? Can we make people play harder by encouraging that likeness, by making their avatar more look like them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something we've been preaching. So, when people have an avatar that connects to their real identity, they have a bigger connection with the avatar they create. And just even if you don't have an avatar that looks like yourself, the more time you spend in the customization menu, kind of connecting with the avatar you create, the more likely you are to come back and play the game. And there's a bunch of research on that. There's also research on on like the fact that the avatar that you use changes your like real world behavior or like thinking. Yeah. So for example, like the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab has done some cool research on that. Like they gave the subjects an avatar that is like with a different ethnicity than themselves and had them use it in VR for a while. And it completely kind of changed the it made users more, or the subjects more empathetic towards the other races. And in another study, they gave users an avatar as an older version of themselves. And the result was that people started thinking more about their financial future, like saving for like retirement.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And also about their health kind of decisions that they're making now and how they affect their future.
Oh, that's super cool. Okay, so that you're already talking about my next question here, but I had never heard these terms before, so let me put them out there and then we can dig in a little bit deeper. So I read about two terms. So there's the Immersionists. So the Immersionists are people for whom their digital identity is totally different from their real world identity. They want to be immersed in the game. They want to forget the real world, right? So you'd imagine those are the people who want their skin to look completely different, their avatar to look completely different. They don't want the baggage of the real world. Then there's the augmentationalists, which is it's an extension of the real world self, right? I want that digital twin, or I want some likeness of myself. So I would imagine that Wolf3D's a little bit more on the augmentationalist side of things, because as you said, 60 to 90% of people took advantage of the avatar customization based off of the photo to make it look like them. But so here was the interesting thing that I saw, that there was some research that suggested that immersionists have lower self-esteem in the real world compared to augmentationalists, right? That they were less confident in their skin, as it were. And so when they went into a game, they wanted to wear a different skin because they didn't want to be necessarily reminded of their real world shackles. Do you have any thoughts at that? Does that line up at all with any of your own readings or research or findings?
It does, yeah. I mean, so, I have a book, which is basically people and their avatars in different games. And when you look at the people that create their avatars after their real selves, then it's usually people that look quite attractive or like decent in real life. And people that don't, would prefer to be a little bit different, I guess. And I've totally seen it in like user studies and user testing we've done over the years. And I think there's definitely some truth in that.
That's really interesting. But
I think maybe a comment on the augmentationalists and the immersionists. I think comes from Second Life, I think, and this is a world where people mostly interacted with like people that didn't know, strangers, and there you do have two camps of people, and some like want to have it as an extension of the real world, and some don't. It's like an escape, but I think most people use it as an escape from the real world to like create a new identity and kind of experiment and live a different world that is better than their real life. But the more people use games and virtual worlds for communication with with the existing world, I guess, like it's an extension of your real life, the more people are so to say augmentationalists. So because it is like an extension of a real world. You're playing with your real friends. You're meeting your real colleagues. So like it's natural to want to be a version of yourself in that environment.
Yeah, I buy that, and I would say the way that I see, for example, just like the people around me, the kids in my life playing socially, because they can't play with their friends on the schoolyard anymore. So video games have become their digital playgrounds. And I think it's really interesting to look at Fortnite and how they're sort of splitting, or not splitting, but kind of encouraging that safe space, the sort of creative mode or the sort of party mode, which is really just about hanging out and chatting kind of thing, particularly the party mode, from the battle royale mode, right? Where it's all about the competition, it's all about the achievement and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think Fortnite in general, like when you compare Fortnite with Counter-Strike, for example, right? So one is a very fast-paced kind of shooter where you run around and you kill people, and there's not much like downtime. Like even if you play like Fortnite Battle Royale, there's a lot of downtime. You like mine, you kind of camp around, you collect resources, and that is a time where you can speak with your friends and about school, about other things. So it's Fortnite, like when I grew up, I used to play basketball, and that was my Fortnite as well. Like, hanging out in a basketball court, chatting with my friends, playing the game as well. But it's like a side activity to the main activity, which was like hanging out.
Yeah. You played basketball. I played Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition.
Dude, I spent thousands of hours in RuneScape.
So if anyone hasn't tried out your tech, I'll just explain it really quickly. Generally speaking, how it works is you take a selfie. A couple of seconds later, there's a stylized avatar with a face that sort of looks like my own. It's got my sort of facial structure, more or less. It's got my skin tone pretty easily mapped. It's got my, whatever ratio of eyes to nose to mouth. All of that sort of stuff seems to be in pretty recognizable to me, at least to my eyes. Hair, glasses, body, clothing, that stuff is all still relatively manual. Is this something you want to automate? And like, what has to happen for technology, not necessarily just you guys, but for technology to be able to automate that?
Yeah. So the first part of our research was purely focused on like creating the face representation, and that was a very difficult task on its own, and it still is, to create avatars from a single photo and a 3D representation. We had to scan tens of thousands of people with our hardware scanners. This is where we started from. We built hardware before. And that database in the background is how we create those avatars using deep learning. So that took a long time to get kind of nailed down or into a level where it's kind of consumer ready. And also like to be able to support different styles, from like kind of more realistic avatars to almost like anime style. So that's been like the biggest part of the development and research we've done. But we've also started with the customization stuff. So we already predict, hair length and curliness, and we have, some tens of classes where we kind of put them. So if you have your own game, you can actually assign them to your own assets, or in our character creator, we use our own art, obviously. Body is something that we've learned people really don't want to be like their own mostly. So like that's, in some cases, maybe like for fashion, like try on and stuff, but mostly people want to kind of that they're okay with the default body that they can customize to kind of get what they want. Yeah. Hair, like glasses, that's easy to do. We already have it actually done in the back end. Clothing, I think we haven't seen much kind of demand for getting a clothing asset from your photo and representing that. It's more like you want to have this fun of choosing it and changing it. And also like from a business model perspective, it makes sense too.
Money is, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, we're like working on more, like we have beard prediction, eyebrow, like size, length, curve, you know, so like things like that we're working on, and we're making it better all the time. And honestly, this part is easier technically than the face kind of reconstruction, which requires a lot of data that doesn't exist and just a lot of pain and like a lot of research and development. And it's
Right.
also like a task which is like, it's complicated because it's like data science combined with, graphics, 3D stuff and art. So the result doesn't only have to be accurate, it also has to be pleasing. People need to love their avatars, and striking the right balance there for each different face type. And also, if the picture is taken in a basement lying on your side without any light, which is like kind of the average input. So yeah.
It's interesting you talk about art and asset creation and how that ties to machine learning and the challenges there, because I can imagine one of the challenges that you and I guess other avatar companies will face or do face is just the idea of representation. We've got effectively infinite numbers of skin tones in the world, and well, I guess 7.8 billion, but still lots of skin tones, lots of possible hairstyles. Human diversity by definition suggests you'll never have complete coverage. So what responsibility, I guess is the word I'm looking for, do you feel to giving players the tools to properly represent themselves? I mean, how do you handle the trade-off between that sort of effectively infinite treadmill of assets needed to cover everyone versus the desire of the player to feel like they're properly represented inside the platform?
Yeah, so I think one part is like kind of the identity creation, which is like a especially sensitive part where we as an avatar creator need to cover, obviously all like ethnicities and ages and things. And we're not doing well with ages, by the way. We're like working on that right now. And that's a very sensitive part. We need to have like the assets for different religions and so forth. So that's something we've kept in mind as we built our stuff, and we've received some feedback. And even genders, we don't want to define or give limited options to people, right? So that's very important, and that's like our duty. And right now, we also take care of the asset creation, which is the skins or customization assets for the avatars. But we're also working with a community of asset creators, very beginning stages still. But eventually, we don't want to be in the kind of avatar asset creation business ourselves. We want players themselves create the assets. We want brands to come in and sell their assets. Our goal is to get our avatars into as many games as possible. So, and that makes the platform very attractive for individual creators that can make money by making assets for the platform, and also brands that want access to games, to virtual worlds. And the games developers get most of the revenue. The people that create those assets also make money from that, obviously. And we are the platform that facilitates that.
Okay. So, I mean, that's super cool for Wolf3D from sort of a business point of view. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. And I guess I want to try and generalize that maybe a little bit more across the industry. And I know it's difficult for you to speak for the industry, but bear with me. Is your thinking then that one way that avatar platforms can keep up with the needs of representation is to encourage community creation and community participation? So not only do I have, if I'm a user of your platform and I try and make myself and I find that I'm pushing up against the limits of your technology, I have the tools at my disposal in order to contribute something in such a way that I can not only reach that level of representation that I'm looking for, but also possibly, monetize that and benefit from that down the line. That I have two avenues available to me to reach my level of representation. That's what you're sort of saying is a way that platform creators such as yourself can work to make sure that all diverse player types are represented.
Exactly, yeah, and not for yourself only, but also for your group, for whatever kind of pop culture you stand for, or religion, or anything. And I think that's the only way to go. Like the kind of user-generated worlds that are kind of an up-and-coming thing, or even a standard in some parts of the gaming world, they will only extend to avatars as well. And they already have in some ways.
You guys talked about this platform ambition, this idea of the sort of persistency between games. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what has to happen for a Wolf3D avatar to work in both Fortnite and Call of Duty and somehow, persist between the two? What are the blockers preventing something like that from happening? And you can go as shallow or as deep as you want. I mean, just kind of talk about those challenges.
Sure. I think first, like, why we think cross-platform identities are important is, the metaverse, the future of the metaverse, we see that as a kind of a fragmented world where you have lots of creators, lots of platforms, lots of virtual worlds. And it doesn't make sense for you to have a different identity in every game and any virtual experience you enter, right? So like cross-platform services, like for the identity, are very required to make it a great experience where it's smooth and it's like a logical. But the identity you create doesn't need to look exactly the same in every environment. So Fortnite and Call of Duty, for example, obviously have very different artistic styles, and we're not sure exactly how this needs to be solved. Like either there are some styles of avatars that you create, and then different games support different styles, or something like that. Like maybe stylizing the characters automatically depending on the environment, which is what we do already with the face and identity, but not with the customization assets yet. Yeah, and then the obstacles are, like I mentioned, the styles, obviously. But I think the biggest obstacle is generally the gaming industry doesn't yet, like the kind of the big gaming companies don't yet buy the idea of interoperability too much, So it's like people want to own, obviously, their IP, they want to own their character systems, they don't want to have people leave the game. So like the standard thinking is that if people spend money on the avatar, they're more like this, they play the game more, basically. Their retention improves. And, I think the change will start not from the big gaming companies. It's more like from VR, for example, it's completely different. Obviously, VR is very small still, and let's see what happens with that. But in VR, lots of VR founders, lots of VR developers, are very kind of, interoperability minded, let's say.
Okay.
Then there's this kind of whole, blockchain gaming space, which is all about interoperability. And then there's like emerging spaces like even like virtual events and kind of technologies and industries around gaming that are new and don't have their established ways yet. So our goal is to find the right way to kind of start building this. And we already have 40 different partners from very different industries with a cross-platform avatar solution. But yeah, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, interoperability obviously is a big subject. Again, referencing Matthew Ball, I mean, it's no secret he's definitely a supporter of the kind of open metaverse, whatever model. Tim Sweeney is as well, right? So can you try and paint a picture of what an open metaverse world, it doesn't matter the time, 20 years, 50 years, 10 years, I don't care. But what, as a player, is that going to feel like? I've got my Fortnite character and I decide I want to do something else, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently. How do I, assuming all the deals have been signed, again, what does that feel like as a player to kind of move from Fortnite to, I don't know, World of Warcraft 3 or whatever? Like, what does that look like? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what that feels like as a player.
Yeah. So we give our users, for example, like when you want to sign into a new experience, you can, bring any of the avatars you've made before into that experience. So if that game has its own specific style, then there will be some automatic stylization applied to that. So it will be in that game style. It's obviously not very straightforward to do that with a very large range of different styles. But I think like just practically, it's more like it's like a sign up with Facebook button that you click. And then, your different avatars will be displayed there and you can choose what you want to use. But yeah, I think it's very difficult to accurately imagine how this is going to be working. And I think to get there maybe it's not like immediately required. I think the path towards there is more important than like the ultimate dream, which is, I guess people share the dream on a very high level, but the specifics are like impossible to imagine accurately.
Yeah, it's a journey. The journey is what matters more so in some ways than the destination, I guess. Okay, and certainly I get that. And I get this idea that, I can have an avatar, a persistent avatar somehow carried over, that because I, bought the banana skin in Fortnite, that when I move over to World of Warcraft 3, that there's some World of Warcraft 3 version of that skin. I get that, and I can understand all of the challenges behind that. But I guess I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, like you talked, for example, about cryptocurrency, right? So, if I've spent whatever, $1,000 on skins in World of Warcraft or $1,000 on skins in Fortnite, and I decide I'm done with Fortnite, my players have all moved over to World of Warcraft 3, I want to go with them. Do you imagine some world where I can get some of that money back, that I can like sell that investment somehow? And I'm not talking like in the aftermarket where I go and I sell it on eBay and I hand over the account. But that if World of Warcraft 3 and Fortnite are willing to share and persist avatar states, would they not also then be willing somehow to share and persist kind of community economy as well?
Yeah, definitely they do. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's helpful to share how we anticipate doing that in Realism and Mii.
Sure.
And we share our revenue based on time spent in different apps. So if you spend $10 on a hoodie, let's say, then within the next month, where you spend the time with this hoodie is how we distribute the money. So it's kind of where you get the value for having this asset, not like about where you bought it from, because that kind of is not that important. It's more like where you get the value.
Okay. Yeah, so absolutely. It sounds like for you guys are betting on the fact that for this open metaverse to work, there's got to be companies like Wolf3D and Ready Player Me, these sort of, persistent layers that tie together these disparate worlds, both in terms of the aesthetics, but also in terms of the business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. That makes sense. All right. Well, I have two closing questions. One of them is an easy sort of wrap-up question. But before we get to that, let's talk about fashion. What do you think is happening with fashion and virtual worlds? It seems to me like every day I hear about this more and more.
Me too.
What's going on there? Why do you think this is popping?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fashion brands first see that, there's a lot of money to be made with virtual fashion, like Fortnite has illustrated very well, and other games as well. So that's an interesting kind of a market for them. I think before they were just seeing games as a way to kind of market their brand to like some younger demographic or something like that. But now they see it as a real kind of a business opportunity. So where they can kind of license their brand, their IP, which is their fashion that they've created in real world, that can then be used in games. And I think that's kind of a big change. And also, obviously, there's no fashion shows, there's no physical kind of marketing stuff that they can normally do and they're used to doing. And so they're trying to kind of break into the virtual world. And then there's a third aspect to it, which is kind of virtual fitting, which is a more practical application, or more, I guess, it's kind of trying out clothes virtually on your avatar. And we've done a project with a big retailer, one of the biggest ones. And it's like that technology is still like not there. And the fashion companies themselves are not very tech. They haven't worked with startups too much. They haven't worked with tech too much. So it's a very new world for them. And it's kind of difficult to make decisions and so forth. But yeah, they definitely want a piece, I think, of the virtual world fashion market, and it makes sense. Like they've built those brands in the real world, and all they have to do is basically license their IP to some games and make money without producing anything. So we have a lot of inbound from fashion brands, and they see us as a way to get into many games at a time. So like instead of going and making deals and creating custom content for each game, they will come to us and get access to a lot of games with one integration.
Okay, so closing question tied to that. 5 years, predictions. What's the metaverse going to look like? And what do you think the role of avatars in general are going to be in that space? What sort of advances will we see over today, do you think?
Yeah, I think like games obviously will be even more social. People will look at games as a natural place to hang out and kind of form relationships around. The games themselves will be generated by users themselves increasingly. So, I think the first generation that is used to using avatars for games will grow up and start working. And I think they will start using more kind of games-like technologies for work as well. I think definitely VR will be adopted by the enterprise, in masses. What it means for the avatars is, avatars become a more important part of our daily lives. We communicate through avatars more and more over the next 5 years in a work context, in a kind of a game context. And a lot more of that communication is going to be with people we already know in real world. So I think games become more like social media is today. It's not like today games are like this other kind of virtual world where I think in 5 years they'll be more like real social media. Like if Donald Trump tweeted something, he can't tweet anymore. Then, it's a part of the real world. It's a real thing. We don't speak about that as something happened in a virtual world in social media somewhere. It's a part of the real world. And I think games will increasingly be that as well. And those are very general predictions and very obvious ones. But yeah.
Okay, well, Timmu, thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining us today, sharing your learnings and lessons from the trenches with Wolf3D, with Ready Player Me, with the thoughts that you've developed over the last few years as you and your company have pushed hard to kind of be a player in this, emerging metaverse space. I think you've got some really interesting insight, and I'm glad you took the time to share it with me and the listeners, and love to, maybe bring you back in a year or so and sort of see where things are at, see how many of our predictions are, moving in the right direction. But for today, thank you very much.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And once again, that's the end of the episode. Thanks, Timmu, for joining. I hope you guys found this conversation on avatars interesting and insightful, and that maybe opened your eyes to some interesting points about how deep down the rabbit hole you can go when you start thinking about representation inside of virtual spaces, inside of video games and the metaverse. It's obviously a big can of worms, and there's a lot of interconnected subjects there. I find it fascinating. Hopefully you do as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't hesitate to let us know. We love getting your feedback, positive or negative, whether we got it, whether we explored a subject in an insightful way or not. We don't do this for the money. Clearly there's no ads. We won't ever put ads into this. It's really just about trying to do a service for the industry and help drive the conversation forward in interesting and meaningful ways. The absolute best quote unquote payment we can get is the feedback from the listeners. So if you have any thoughts, guests you'd like us to talk to, subjects you'd like us to explore, please, by all means, reach out. Twitter, LinkedIn, email, not hard to find, and just let us know what you think. As always, thanks for listening. Tune in a couple of weeks for what I think is going to be another very interesting and exciting episode. It's one I've been sitting on for a long time, and I can't wait for you to hear it. All right, have a great one. Talk to you soon. Bye.